Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. This is part 2 of our interview with Dustin Kott.
What I would be doing is making improvements. And so everywhere I've been, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. When I was hired, people knew what my capabilities were. And so what naturally happens is that you'll have people that will approach me or you about, hey, I'd love to learn.
If you missed part 1, please go back and listen to that. Dustin, thinking about this idea of lean and continuous improvement, enterprise excellence, there's all these different names for it. When you think about organizations that they want to help the whole organization become more like the Toyota production system and have everybody feel like they get to bring their brain to work, it's not the people who do and the people who think. And so often when stuff gets started, it's almost overwhelming for people to start paving new roads over the deep ruts that are their previous habits. What advice do you have for leaders who are saying, no, I want to have, this respect for every person, infiltrate everything, and we want everyone here helping make sure that what we're doing is stuff that's actually valuable for a customer? What kind of advice do you have for overcoming that initial resistance from staff?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think one of the things that if I kind of look back at what I've done, I think there's probably two things. First of all is to just do a little bit of education. It's like a 101 kind of a teaching exercise and I really like to show. So you can have the lecture piece of it, and you can tell you educate on the principles. And those are great, right? But if you can show people, that goes so much further. And so, I have this little pen simulation that I use, and we set up a push system, which is the traditional mass manufacturing method, and then we go to a pull system using this Japanese term called Kanban. And then we eliminate the Kanban and we go to an even much more improved system, a flow system. And we keep track of the metrics as we go through each iteration of this process. And so you can see that on the scoreboard, the results are irrefutable. You're going to get more out. You're going to do it right. You're going to get better quality. You're going to be more efficient. All of the metrics just go in the right way. And the thing is, the people were the ones that went through the improvement exercise themselves. So there's no argument as to the benefits of flow systems and pull systems over the traditional push systems. And the other benefit is that they get to see the principles in action right in front of them, so they can conceptually see it. So I always like to do that, and that's just kind of giving people the basics of here's what lean is and here's how it operates. As you know, there are so many tools and so many methods and principles that you could just literally overwhelm people with information. But to me, that's like a push system. You're pushing information on people when they're not ready for it. And at my age now, and with the number of experiences I have this huge toolkit or toolbox that I can draw upon. So I can go into about any process, whatever it is, and say, okay, well, let's use this tool. And so I can use the right tool at the right time and then educate people. So that being said, the other thing I like to do is lead by example. And there's probably no better thing that a leader can do than just go dig into a process together with your people. And it's not doing the process for them. It's just doing it with them. And as you go through that, you're going to teach them and show them some of the principles or some of the tools that are available. And I love going through. I love to do that. It's so much fun. I don't know why some of us are wired that way, but I just love making processes visible and improving them. And it's something that I do every single day. Even today, we've had two processes that we had some failures with some of our customers, and so we dove into the process to find out what those failures were, and it was a collective effort. It's not me with all the answers, because I certainly don't have all the answers and I don't know the process, but let's make that process visible so we can all see it, understand it, know together, so we can decide together on how we're going to move forward. So two things, probably, just basic education. And again, I like the simulation. I love simulations, and I have one that works really well with some metrics. And then leading by example. I think those are probably the two keys to overcoming the inertia that's in every organization.
Yeah, it's interesting how easy it is when we think, okay, we need folks to approach things in a new way. We want to change the perspective they've got on it. Quickly, let's grab some PowerPoint and go to the conference room, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think about Mylan, our company, it took us 3.5 years to get to the model we do now, where we have a kind of a proprietary coaching methodology we've been using on our clients, these different, CEOs and commanding generals, and now we're teaching it to managers and leaders to do on their staff of hey, what if you earned more of a relationship by taking your self-interest hat off every once in a while and take the boss hat off and just help them?
Yeah.
And, the first time we really went this direction, we got great response, but the people who were in the course, they didn't get good at it. They just said, oh, that was a great course, right?
Yeah.
And the 2 days were over, and 2 weeks later it was probably fuzzy, and 2 months later nobody could remember it, is my guess. And we switched to this new thing where we just do a couple hours a week for 8 weeks in a row. That an hour and a half of that is them actually doing it, and shocker, everybody's really liking it, and clients keep ordering more of it. And I'm like, what were we doing for the first 3 years?
Yeah.
Why weren't we out there learning by doing? Why were we trying to do learning by lecture?
Yeah, exactly. I think another thing I think really helps is that people find out that process improvement is kind of fun, and it's nothing to be afraid of. And especially if you can do it in a way in which is non-threatening, like you can get people's buy-in on things, and their job, they're not in trouble for this broken process that they just happen to be a part of, right? And so I think people do enjoy making things better. They really do. They want to work in a better place. So
yeah, it's interesting how letting them make the success. If they give them half an hour and they have their own win, that's worth 5 hours of me telling them they could have a win. Oh
yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I mean. And people know their job, their work, their process better than anybody else. The people that do it daily, they're the closest to it. So if you can just tap into that, and then if I think back to my OC Tanner experience, for instance, my boss there just enabled me to do amazing things. That's all it was, right? He created an environment where I had this lab, I could go experiment, and he just encouraged me along that whole process, and I had a ton of fun doing it. I mean, I just had a blast, and in the process, I built these amazing relationships with people, that we still maintain today, and I haven't worked there for 15 years, but we still stay in touch just because we just had so much fun going through that whole learning and growth process together.
One thing I really admire about those guys, after I found out they had won the Shingo Prize, I went on tours over there and started to meet some of them, right? And Gary Peterson kind of became a bit of a mentor of mine, and he's probably one of my very favorite, if not very favorite, episode we've had on the show. Out of 250 of them so far, And it
Gary's
feels
awesome,
right? I feel like there's this approach of yes, we got to get our work done, but it's almost like the bigger reason we're here is to shape the long-term capabilities of the people, not can we crank this out by the end of the month? It's almost like a talent development business as much as it is can we crank out these widgets business.
Yeah, and that just goes back to a lot of that is Gary himself, right? And just the type of leader he is. This is so ironic we're talking about Gary, because today he just reached out to me and said some, he just complimented me on some things. And, he didn't have to do that. I know he's busy. He's got a million things going on, but here's my boss from 15 years ago reaching out and saying
Is
hi.
he who your boss was?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I work for Gary. So, but that's just Gary. But that's the, he created an environment for us to thrive. And I will say this, he created an environment of high expectations too. I mean, there was accountability. I mean, I couldn't go 2 weeks with not having a discussion with him where I had to show my metrics and show improvement in my metrics, right? But I also know Gary really cared, right? If I was failing in my job, he understood, and he was there to help me. But he also expected me to make things better. And looking back on the whole thing, it was just a huge growth experience for me and the rest of us. I mean, the amount of learning that I think I did in that 4 years when I was with Occitana was probably the most accelerated period of growth in my whole career. And it was all due to the environment that was there in Gary's leadership.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break from the sponsor, and then I got another question for you.
Okay, great.
So, Dustin, my next question for you is kind of similar to a guest we just had on the show, Art Byrne, pretty famous in the space. And you hear about how he can acquire a company like Wire Mold, and they do these processes, and they let everybody play this team sport together instead of just management, and they really accomplish this. It becomes the way things are done around there. And in like 9 years, they grew the enterprise value by 2,500%. And so like the inner investor in me gets all excited when I hear those kind of numbers, to then find out it includes, like, I think he bought over 20 companies during that period. And he then goes on to participate in private equity fund, doing the same thing at other organizations. And it's not a one-time lucky shot. Like, it's a systematic thing that if people master can be done over and over. In your mind, knowing that that's not possible if it's just the folks in operations or just the engineers or just the lean guy or just the continuous improvement expert, that's not going to be possible. What advice do you have for folks who want to help the whole organization want to play this as a team sport instead of just that thing operations does?
Yeah, that's a good point. So here's what I found, from my senior leadership roles that I've been in, is that it's so easy to get bogged down in just the minutia of running a business. I mean, there's like, a million problems, and, you're either trying to, solve problems or figure out how to manage growth or whatever it might be. And one of the things I have found is that it's super important that you do have somebody internally that can just focus on the continuous improvement. Because, again, leaders and executives can just get so busy doing things. That being said, those leaders and executives also have to be leading the charge for continuous improvement and set the example.
Well, and that's what I want to talk about is, let's say it's not the CEO who gets the bug first here. How does another executive, or how does somebody else in the organization, what would you do to attract management to come, want to try it out themselves and actually see it themselves and experience the metrics themselves and gain that new perspective? How do you get, what would you be doing to make it attractive enough that they take time out of whatever they were going to do and now build some of this into their schedule to come see, to come see it themselves?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think just what I would be doing is making improvements. And so everywhere I've been, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. When I was hired, people knew what my capabilities were. And so what naturally happens is that you'll have people that will approach me or you about, hey, I'd love to learn more about this. And so you start to gravitate to those people and you pull them in and you start to use them to help. You educate them on what the principles are, and then you can go out and start making improvements and then give them projects where they can go have some successes and some wins, and you can help them out with it. So but for me, as long as I'm making improvements myself, there's always somebody that wants to come along. So
kind of let success speak for itself. Show it in the numbers instead of just claim it'll do good.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what level you're at in an organization or what your role is. If you're actively on the proactive side of making improvements to a process, it doesn't matter where you're at. Any leader in any organization is going to value that effort, because even if it was not expected of you as an associate and you're making improvements, that's how you get promoted in organizations, is once you have enough of those experiences and you know how to make things better, you become invaluable at that point. And, senior leaders will reach out to you to help make things better somewhere. They'll put you on the biggest problems in the company because you're so good at, fixing things.
Yeah. It's interesting. Maybe as kind of a thing in closing, I'd love to get you to weigh in on is you kind of mentioned it, but maybe we didn't call it out specifically. I think another reason that this methodology is so interesting to me is, again, back to this, like, it makes a lot of money and people like their job better. It's like the best of both worlds, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the things, and you kind of brought this up, is this idea of when something goes wrong, instead of finger pointing and saying this person messed us up and causing defensiveness and stuff, there's like this predilection to say, what did we not properly design about this system that an error like that is possible? And instead of embarrassing people or getting people's defensiveness, it's like, take a look in the mirror. What did I not take responsibility for in the creation of this system that errors like that are possible? And rather than cry over my spilled milk about it, what are we going to do about it so that it's error-proof for the next time? Can you talk about this principle?
Yeah. So this is what we call the five whys before the five whos. And so there's a principle in lean thinking that basically says if you ask why 5 times, you'll get to the root cause of a problem. So it's not just asking one why, and fixing that. It's like, well, let's keep asking why until you get to the root cause, and you'll prevent errors from surfacing again. But really, leaders within organizations are the owners of processes. And what I've found is that within organizations, there's processes, and some of those were intentionally designed or architected, and others were not. And so it just by default became how you do something. And if it's just a default kind of process, you're asking for problems, and people will struggle within those processes. So when things go wrong, if you're the type of person that's going to blame somebody, you're looking at things totally wrong, because as the leader, you're the owner of all the processes. And so, you got to first go to the process and say, what's my role in the ownership of this process? And then, why is this process not working? How can we make it better? And of course, you want to involve people in that whole process as you look at how you do things and how to make them better. But really, leaders are the owners or the architects of how businesses operate. And so, like when I look at small businesses, for instance, they're super competitive and are competing really well with bigger companies, is because they have intentionally architected processes that enable them to be, quicker, faster, more efficient, whatever it might be, and disrupt the business, the methodology in some way that their competitors haven't. So process ownership is huge, and all leaders need to understand that they're the owners of them.
I love this term. I'm totally going to plagiarize you now. Intentionally architected. It really
intentionally
does.
Architected.
Yeah, it really does describe it so well. It's like, don't just act, think. Like if we would think harder instead of being in such a rush, it's amazing the Pareto principle efficiencies, 80-20 efficiencies that are available with a little extra thinking, right?
Yeah. And, people hate to work, you've heard this before as well, but, if you put a good person in a bad process, the process is going to beat that good person up. But the process always wins. And if you can just get good people and great processes, you can have great results. And so imagine what happens if you get great people and great processes together. You get amazing things can happen. But people have to realize that it's the process that's superior, and good processes are really what can enable success and wealth and a lot of other things. But we just have to make them visible, and we have to be intentional about them. You can't just, by default, this is how we do things.
And
that's
invite everybody to play. Like, everybody gets to be a part of making this process better, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the special people. In fact, if anybody's the special people, it's the people who are closest to the work, not the people back in the office, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's fun, right? That's when you get to be creative and use your mind rather than just ho hum do your job. That's boring stuff.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks for doing this. Thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jess. Glad to be on the show.
Yeah, it's been fun. Well, that's it for the episode. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, if you'll remember the guys from Convoy in episodes back, Ken Free and Trent Mano, I went on one of their CEO trips to New York, and I met a guy named Brent Thompson, very successful entrepreneur. He was former CEO of Jive Communications, big company now, I think $300 or $400 million. Anyways, he started a new company called blipbillboards.com. I'm super stoked they're a sponsor now. But I remember a year and some ago when I met him, I thought it was genius. Instead of having to buy 6 months or a year's worth of billboard for thousands of dollars, you can buy 8 seconds at a time for like 10 or 20 cents. You pick what billboard you want it on, what time of day you want it to run. And it just puts so much power in the hands of marketers and CEOs who want to try something and see if it works. You can buy as many or as few as you want, change it as many times as you want. I think now our podcast is being advertised on billboards in like 18 different states because we have these guys as sponsors. We're pretty excited about it. Hope you check out blipbillboards.com. Thanks.